Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I feel, first of all, so honored to be celebrating with you World Logic Day. And these two individuals have inspired me tremendously since I met them. Not only because they're bringing an awareness of this thing we call logic, but also the understanding that we live in a global world, that what impacts us right here, right now, is actually impacting people all over the world. And today, I know it's a celebration of humanity, and it's a celebration of actually our gifts and our abilities as human beings to have logic. So and Chelsea mentioned a little bit about my background. I have been in the health and wellness industry for over 38 years. And the way that that happened for me is when I was 16, I was involved in a robbery when I was visiting my family in South America. You can probably tell the sexy accent. I'm from Colombia, and my father's Italian descent. And while I was there, robbers came into the house at night and they point their guns and hit us. And we thought it was the end. But thank God, the neighbors called the police and they fled. They stole whatever they needed. But that night, I found myself in the hospital, bruised and everything, but alive. And I felt like I was given a chance to live. And 2 weeks later, I happened to have a dream that I was going to be a doctor at 16 years old. And I saw myself serving millions of people, and it was so vivid. And so I went to my counselor at high school and I said, I'm going to be a doctor. What do I need to do? And they said, well, you're a good student, but you need to be a great student. And I was an athlete. And so I became a great student, got accepted at one of the best pre-med programs in the world at the University of Dallas. And then from then on, I was heading to medical school. And I thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon. I was going to help with neurology and help people get well. And I was involved in an accident. They took me to emergency. And the orthopedic surgeon there was a friend of mine. And he said, you need to go see my doctor of chiropractic. They can help you more than me at this time. So I went there and I realized that the doctor, as he introduced himself to me, he said, I can see you're starting to be a doctor. And let me tell you three things that we focus on in this practice. And these tenets changed my life. The first one was, I want you to know that your body has the ability to heal itself. The second one was that the body is composed of 12 systems. Those systems are made up of organs that are made up of cells. And every one of those systems have a function, and they maintain the health and the balance in the body. And lastly, he said, most people, they're going to focus on symptoms and managing those symptoms. In our office, we're going to focus on the root cause of why you're here. Those three things became the foundation for me not to be able to sleep for 6 months, interview 62 doctors of chiropractors to find out what this thing is. And I was introduced to what I call the world of prevention. Now, mind that in those days, there was no preventative medicine. There was no integrative medicine. There was no complementary medicine. There was no wellness. So my counselor said to me, well, if you want to go in this space, become a doctor of chiropractic. And from there, you can actually help shape the world and help people to understand that prevention is the key to health. So that's what I did. I became a doctor of chiropractic. I started studying acupuncture, energy medicine, integrative medicine, nutrition, and became very influential and a big contributor in that space, to the point that I became a Hall of Famer in the wellness revolutionaries, the people that have contributed the most to wellness. In that journey, I was a practitioner for 10 years. Then in my alma mater, our founder passed away, and the board asked me if I would take over as president of the university. I said no for 2 years, but then they talked me into it. I thought it was going to be 6 months, but it ended up being 13 and a half years. But I became the youngest president, according to NBC, that interviewed me the next day, at the time, in a university in the United States at 33 years old. I went from healthcare to education. And then I retired after 13 and a half years and became a media expert for shows like Fox News, CNN, Dr. Phil, The Doctors. And I've been spending all of that time really trying to inspire people and training thousands of doctors on how to get to the root cause of the problem. But we have right now a major crisis in the world, in the healthcare systems of the world. And this is where our logic needs to come in more than ever before. Chronic disease has become the most expensive of all diseases and the number one reason, according to the World Health Organization, over 70% of all deaths, premature deaths, are due to chronic disease. And chronic disease are primarily heart disease, cancers, diabetes, obesity, chronic pain, arthritis, and many others. Why is that important? Because the human body, according to science today, was meant to live over 100 years old healthy. But we know today that people are now sicker than ever. In fact, chronic disease is now present in children more than ever. We've never seen chronic disease in children. Chronic disease means that a disease is persistent for over 3 months in your body. And these diseases, the majority of them can be prevented. And my message in utilizing logic is, what is causing these problems in the first place? But we live in a healthcare system around the world, and I've lectured to healthcare systems around the world as to how they can actually implement more natural practices into the healthcare system and address the root causes of the problem in order to not only reduce chronic disease, but more importantly, increase the health and well-being of their individuals. So the United Nations has one sustainable development goal, number 3, that I particularly love. And that is that we want to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being at all ages. So when I read that, it resonated so much with me, because how do we do that? What is the logic in order to make something like that happen? And to me, like I give you the example of the president of Mexico had asked me if I would come in and bring wellness practices and professions like chiropractic, naturopathy, gerontology, nutrition, all of these natural degrees that we have in the United States, they didn't have in Mexico. And the reason that he wanted that is, he said, we're graduating all these medical doctors, but we have no place for them. Now, Mexico is a very unique country because 95% of the healthcare costs the government pays for. So they have a very high interest level of not only reducing costs, but increasing the health of their citizens. So what we did is that we brought in and we opened 2 universities that the government subsidized, because they recognized that by investing in these professionals, they were going to ultimately reduce the cost of healthcare for their citizens. So they subsidized the majority of the education for their people. They invited people from the smaller towns that don't usually get healthcare practitioners going there. And we began that process 15 years ago. We graduated over 5,000 healthcare professionals over the years. And they were so taken by my contribution that, according to them, I'm the only living human being that is a non-Mexican citizen that has a public building, a library named after them in one of the universities that we put together. Why am I sharing that with you? Because like Mexico, all of our countries can do the same. They can begin to use logic to recognize that traditional healthcare has been amazing in saving lives, but that's less than 5% of our problems. Over 95% of our problems are the conditions that I just mentioned to you, the chronic diseases that are plaguing our loved ones, and now our little ones. When have you seen, like in the United States, 7 out of 10 people are considered to be overweight and obese? Now, the reason why that is concerning is because obesity is a precursor for diabetes and for heart disease and for cancer and for many of the conditions out there. So we must do something about it. We must begin to recognize what is it that we can do uh, in our communities? What is it that we can do in our governments? What is it that we can do? What agencies, what organizations out there are educating individuals into taking responsibility for their behaviors? You see, I boiled it down that being healthy is as simple as making a better healthy choice today than I did yesterday. That's the only thing that would ensure that you're going to be healthy in the future. And for years, I've been trying to teach people, if you want to prevent, I remember the days when genetics was in the 80s and 90s, everybody thought that 90% of the chronic diseases were genetically driven. And then we had the science evidence of what we call epigenetics. And the difference is that genetics are the genes, it's what determines what you become. But epigenetics is the environment around the cell that actually can turn on that gene or keep it turned off. So just because your grandmother had breast cancer and your mother had breast cancer doesn't mean that you're going to have breast cancer. Logic will tell us, what did my grandmother do? How did she live her life? What was her thought process? What were her behaviors? What was her nutrition like? What was her activities like? What was her attitudes and emotions like? And what can I do differently in order not to end up like my grandmother, like my mother? That's epigenetics. So right now, there has been a tremendous emphasis in understanding that our lifestyle, the choices that we make every single day, the environments that we surround ourselves with, do you have a toxic environment or do you have a healthy environment in your household? Is the air clean in your household or is it full of bacteria and viruses? Are you living in a toxic environment that is not only polluting the air in your community, but are you doing something about that process in order to maintain a healthy environment in your community? These are the things that we must address. And what's interesting in the United States, we have a new administration coming in, and part of that administration is what we call Make America Healthy Again. That mission, that movement that is supported by millions of people has really stood up into saying we need to think differently about the health that we're living. We need to pay attention to all of these preservatives that are put in our food so they can stay longer in the shelves instead of eating more organic and natural foods. These are what is it that we're putting in our foods like dyes and toxics that are now have been found to be the foundations and the reasons of why many of us are suffering from chronic disease. So there's going to be a new understanding of education, but also more importantly, an engagement to individuals to take ownership of their health. For 35 years, I would ask people out there in the audiences where I spoke or in the environments that I belong to, I would say, tell me the 3 things that you value the most in your life. It's a very good question to ask people because the values of people is what determines their behavior. And less than 1% of the people ever said health as a top priority. Less than 1%. Today, over 70% of the people have put health as a top priority, as a value. And why? Because of the pandemic. The pandemic forced people to recognize that there was more to our bodies, there were more to our health that we have given credit to. So in this World Logic Day, my participation, my contribution to you today is to hopefully encourage you to begin to use logic every single day when it comes to your health behaviors, to use logic when it comes to your health mindset. What are the belief systems that you have? Do you believe that as we get older, we get unhealthy? Or do you actually believe that at 100 years old, you can be a pretty healthy individual? Do you believe that your 60s could be your 30s? Right? Right now, I'm about to turn 60 this year, and my body physically, lab-wise, x-rays-wise, is so much more healthier than when I was 21 years old. My x-rays my bones have regenerated. There's no arthritis in my body. My stamina is the best it's ever been, my clarity, and it's all because of the behaviors that I choose to exercise every single day. So in order to, and for all of us to support this UN SDG 3, ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being for all and all ages, I want you to make a choice today, a healthy choice that is better than yesterday, and to recognize that if we can promote that behavior, inspire others around us, especially our children and our parents, then hopefully we can actually end chronic disease by the example that we're following every single day. To me, logic can be inspired by many things. It could be inspired by something you hear today. It could be inspired by an experience you've had. If it could be inspired by a podcast that you hear. It could be inspired by a book that you read. It could be inspired by a YouTube video. What I'm asking you to do is don't make that logic go to waste. Exercise it, put it into practice, and recognize that health is one of the most important things that you have because it impacts every area of your life. There is no way that you will ever fulfill your human potential if your health has not been fulfilled. That's been my message, and I hope that somehow this will inspire you to implement it into your life starting today. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chelsea. It's been such an honor to be here and celebrating with you this World Logic Day, and I hope this was helpful.